That should be it. All right, I think I'm recording. Did it say recording for you guys?
Yeah.
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 All right, cool. Can you see the like little zoom thing though? Should I move that down? I don't know. Can you guys see that? All right, I'll just start. All right. Hi, everyone. Our group has researched Samsung and the semiconductor industry. So, for a company overview, Samsung is a Korean electronics company that produces phones, tablets, computers, semiconductors, and even devices like smart refrigerators. It was originally established in 1969 as a grocery trading store, but became a large corporation when they expanded to the electronics market. They currently have 6 different sub-companies under the parent group Samsung Global, which each address a different portion of the electronics market. During our presentation today, we are mainly going to be focusing on the Samsung Electronics department, as this is the segment that develops semiconductors. They produce phones, tablets, computers, that type of stuff. So Samsung is a global company with offices in Korea, China, Japan, Southeast Asia, Germany, and the United States in order to deliver products to worldwide customers. So currently, the largest number of their manufacturing centers are in Korea, their home country, and then the United States and China. And the largest competitors of Samsung in the semiconductor business are Intel, Taiwan Semiconductors, Qualcomm, and Micron. Intel, Qualcomm, and Micron are all based in California, and then Taiwan Semiconductors is based in Taiwan. Samsung has recently fallen a bit behind in the chip making race, so in order to become a more competitive firm, management has promised that they will begin making chips with a 2 nanometer process in 2025 and a 1.4 nanometer process in 2027, which will help them compete with their other semiconductor peers. Okay, so now for an overview of what is currently happening in the semiconductor industry. So semiconductors are such a big deal because they play a super large role in the development of electronic devices that are super integral to 21st century society, like, phones, radios, TVs, computer, and medical diagnostic equipment. So this is one of the biggest upcoming industries, and the pandemic showed us just how inconsistent the semiconductor supply chain is. So during the pandemic, global trade slowed down to such a degree that semiconductor shortages have still not fully recovered in 2023. So yeah, in addition to that, the pandemic kind of issues, there was also the changing climate has also affected supply chain shortages, such as the flooding in China's Yangtze River in 2022. So as a result of these supply chain disruptions, we are seeing this trend called nearshoring, which is where companies are moving centers of production to easier trading spots so that supply chains can be more resilient in the case of more supply chain disruptions in the future or geopolitical tensions. Speaking of geopolitical tensions, another reason companies are trying to move some of their centers of production are the geopolitical tensions between the US and China. So there's been a trade war between the US and China right now, and both companies want control of the booming semiconductor business. So Biden administration is moving to stop Russia and China from having control of this by using CHIPS Act funding to encourage companies to have manufacturing plants in other countries outside China. This is really good for emerging markets in Southeast Asia like Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand, who are leveraging this CHIPS Act to win a market share in China.
Okay, so in 2023, the U.S. Department of Commerce, under the Biden administration, launched the CHIPS and Science Act, also known as CHIPS for America. The official White House statement states that the act will lower costs, create jobs, strengthen supply chains, and counter China. And essentially, what it does is it allocates $50 billion towards funding for United States semiconductor companies, including $39 billion in incentives. Um, the the act provides a massive boost for semiconductor companies in America like Micron, Qualcomm, and Global Foundries. And what this does is increase the competition for Samsung, which is obviously a foreign semiconductor company, by reducing American reliance on foreign semiconductor manufacturers. But on the other hand, it could provide an opportunity for Samsung to collaborate with American semiconductor companies because uh, companies like Qualcomm and Global Foundries have collaborated, and there's no reason why Samsung can't also do that to kind of get in there and get some of the funding. You can move on to.
Okay, so these are some rationales for Samsung moving their factories to Vietnam. There were several of them, but these are the main ones. Restrictions and regulations in China regarding foreign enterprises. Some of these examples include heightened inspection of technology transfers, intellectual property rights, and local content requirements. So Chinese regulators have become increasingly vigilant in scrutinizing foreign technology transfers to Chinese partners, particularly in the semiconductor industry, which is considered a strategic sector. The Chinese government, they made a plan called Made in China 2025, which plans to aim to increase the country's self-sufficiency in key technologies such as semiconductors, which has led to heightened scrutiny of foreign investment and technology transfers in this area. Another concern was the intellectual property rights. Chinese authorities have been criticized for not doing enough to protect intellectual property rights, leading to concerns over counterfeiting and trade secret theft. Semiconductors in particular, semiconductor companies in particular invest heavily in research and development, and they rely on strong intellectual property protection to ensure return on their investment. Another concern was production costs and talent pool. Samsung may be able to reduce production costs by relocating its manufacturing facilities to Vietnam. Wages have been on the rise in China, given its rapidly growing economy, along with rents and other resource costs. A technology worker in Vietnam also makes a third as much as a Chinese employee. These are some other reasons. Political tensions. In recent years, there's been a lot of political tensions with China and other nations, which makes more conducting business riskier. And also there's supply chain disruptions. Location was also another thing. Vietnam is situated near major markets like China and India, which are significant consumers of electronic devices. Vietnam's proximity to these markets enables Samsung to reduce transportation costs and improve delivery times towards these regions. And the last one, access to raw materials. Vietnam has a strong, growing semiconductor market, which means supply chains for necessary materials are established and expanding, which would make it easier for Samsung to source these raw materials. This graph or this table is basically just showing Samsung has already moved 28 factories producing electronics in Vietnam across 11 different provinces.
All right, so now transitioning into how Samsung can gain entry into this market. The use of foreign direct investment overall is one big way in which they can gain entry, and this is specifically done through the development of subsidiaries. Historically, Samsung's preferred method of expanding into new markets in general has been to establish foreign subsidiaries. This more localized subsidiary would facilitate improved efficiency of Samsung's manufacturing in these overseas markets, since a specialized subsidiary can better access local markets and adapt to rapidly changing market conditions. In addition to subsidiaries, contract manufacturing is another application of foreign direct investment, and with Southeast Asia being a hub for semiconductor manufacturing, there are a few companies that Samsung could outsource manufacturing to. This process can be implemented by the utilization of a local manufacturer already in the region here in Vietnam, while sharing resources and profits involved in the enterprise between the respective parties involved in a pre-agreed manner.
Okay, and about financing the international business, first we have to mention the CHIPS Act funding. The CHIPS Act is subsidy that the US government is offering to semiconductor companies to prohibit them from developing new factory in China, Russia, or any company that has geopolitical risks. Um, as the U.S. new policy, the CHIPS policy mentioned, uh, if Samsung wants to accept U.S. government subsidies, the expansion of semiconductor production capacity in China in the next 10 years should not exceed 5%. Even though this policy was delayed something for 10 months, increasing the investment of the semiconductor was not a good idea for something subsidy in China. The CHIPS Act grant is dependent on the application, which will start being granted in 2023, but the US government has pledged 52 billion will be allocated to various semiconductor companies. They should just focus on their new factory, which is planning to build at the end of 2024 at Tyler, Texas. Second, Samsung Electronics can borrow from Samsung Display. Samsung Display is a subsidiary of Samsung Electronics that responsible for developing the LED panel technology founded in Samsung company tables and others. And to with this loan, Samsung Electronics is deciding to relocate money from one sector of their business to the more competitive semiconductor industry.
And our final slide is how this will impact the overall strategy of Samsung. So the first point is that by switching to Vietnam, they're securing even lower wages and better able to defend profit margins. As mentioned before in a previous slide, the technology worker in Vietnam makes about a third as much of a Chinese employer. So in essence, Samsung is innovating ways to further cut production costs. Another overall strategy is that Samsung has been able to align its FOSI with Vietnamese government's modernization and export goals to benefit from favorable terms, substantially reducing startup and future costs. It's just an example of how close business-government relations have proven advantageous. It sort of goes off the idea that Samsung derives important benefits from its high-level negotiated relationships with the Vietnamese government, and by relocating to a host country whose political economy is more amenable to influence its strategic LLM matters. And a final strategy is that crucial to Samsung in their relationship with Vietnam is their ability to use FDI as CSR. They have a focus on educational programs directed towards digital technologies as an enabler of material and societal progress.
I thank you so much for listening, and please ask us any questions during class when you guys hear it.